Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome to another special release of Investor Stories. On this installment, the experts discuss a startup that they did not invest in, why they passed, and if there was a key learning that now informs their approach. Here's the segment called Why I Passed. On today's special segment, we have Oren Klaff of Intersection Capital. Oren, can you tell us about a good or a bad pass? A story about an investment that you passed on.
You know, it's one of those questions like people are like, hey, what's your favorite movie? And you're a movie buff, right? And you're like, oh, I can't remember a single movie of the 500 movies that I love.
Yeah.
I think that one, oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many that come our way and I go, oh, that's crazy. Every single deal that has ever come through Intersection Capital that has pitched us for money, except for the founder of Atari. But every other deal that had a good management team, had a good amount of capital in, was executing on a real problem, has raised money. We never get an alert like, hey, the company failed to raise money. They adjust the story, they change the price, they do something to the customer. But when they're on the case, they always raise money. And so the passes that I regret are the ones where we thought, hey, we're going to be the only money in the deal. This team is not going to be able to raise money. Companies always raise money.
On today's special segment, we have Tamara Steffens of M12. Tamara, can you tell us a story about a good or a bad pass? A story about a startup that you passed on.
Well, I mean, can I flip this question, because I've been with M12 only for 8 months, so
right.
I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I can tell you a startup that I've passed on going to.
Oh, okay, that's good. I like it.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the name. Let's just say in the container business, it's huge. It's based on it might have been the guys that wrote Kafka, and another big venture firm that is one of the founders of that firm, near and dear friend of mine, said you should go help them with biz dev and sales, and they're amazing. And I said, this is super cool, but I honestly think technologically it's just not in my wheelhouse. I'm not super excited about it. And you can probably figure out what that company is. They're killing it. They hired amazing people. And I look back at it and go, wow, that was I should have done that. And that was right after we got sold to a company by Microsoft. So I wouldn't have stayed at Microsoft, and I wouldn't be having an awesome time at M12, which I am having now. So I don't really regret it, but I do look back at, and there's obviously, you have several of those were just rocket ships that you could have gotten on and you didn't. And it's great to have been considered. And I like to look at those opportunities as, maybe I won't make that mistake in the future.
On today's special segment, we have Leo Polovets of Sousa Ventures. Leo, can you tell us a story about a startup that you passed on, a good or a bad pass?
So one pass that we made pretty early on, actually, in my venture career, it was probably about 5 or 5.5 years ago that I regret, was in a company called Algolia. So Algolia provides auto-completion and search as a service for a lot of websites. So I think they're used by Crunchbase and Product Hunt and a lot of large sites. And at the time, a couple of the reasons that we passed were, first, the company was in France. And at the time, we were only investing in US companies. And I remember talking to the founder and asking them if they might end up moving to the US at some point. And it didn't seem like that was really a direction they were headed in. Although it turned out a couple of years later, they did decide to move to the US. But that was one factor for us, that we weren't super comfortable investing outside of the US and North America. And another factor for us was that, we were looking at the pricing, we were looking at the customer sizes, and we were trying to map out how big we thought the market could be. And we weren't sure how big it would be. And we weren't really sure if it would pass that $1 billion threshold that investors really think about a lot. And in retrospect, I think what I didn't appreciate is that pricing is actually a pretty easy thing to fix. If you price right on day one, that's great. But a lot of companies can end up doubling or tripling their prices over time. And for some companies, they can 10x their prices over time. And so I don't know anything about Algolia's, business traction so far. I just know they've grown a lot and have raised a lot of money and seem, like they built a great company. But I have a feeling that, the market size objection was just like way, way off. And that's something I really tried to internalize, that, in some of these pitches, a lot of things are early and there's some things that you can't change. Like you can't really change the founding team, or you can't really change, their values and beliefs and what they care about. But there's other things like pricing, or maybe, the way you pitch a product, that are easy to change. And so I try not to, let those influence me too much if everything else about a company seems promising.
Do you find that a lot of the companies from outside of the U.S. or maybe outside of the Bay Area end up relocating there at some point in their development?
It's been a mix. We've actually, over the last few years, we've seen more and more companies outside of the Bay Area, but in the greater U.S., and also invested in more and more of those companies. So I think in our first fund, we were probably 90+% Bay Area focused. In the second fund, it was probably more like 2/3. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to 50-50 in this third fund we just started. I definitely see more companies basically building a part of their team elsewhere, and then maybe having the founders or a few salespeople in the Bay Area. And I see that a lot just because of the cost of living and, the challenge of hiring some roles like engineers in the Bay Area where there's just so much competition. And it's often easier to, have the founders in the Bay Area, have a few execs or a few salespeople, and then your engineering team is in Atlanta or Portland or maybe Eastern Europe. So I see that a lot. For teams that start out in the Bay Area, I think they often end up moving in the same direction, but they'll start out with the team in Europe, and then maybe eventually a few of the founders or execs will move to the US. So I think in both cases, you end up with a team that's usually split between like a cheaper area for a lot of employees and then more expensive area that's more key to sales for a few of the more sales-oriented individuals.
Got it. On today's special segment, we have Byron Deeter of Bessemer. Byron, can you tell us a story about a good or a bad pass? A story about a startup that you passed on.
Oh, so there are many on our anti-portfolio page. I'll pull out Tesla here because I love frontier tech. I'm a car geek at heart. I absolutely believe that electrification is the future of automotive and have for many years. And I actually bought one of the early Roadsters, but it's damn hard to build a car company. And the history of the world has not been kind to car companies. And I did not see the path from the Roadster to the S to a profitable company. And they had many fortunate breaks along the way, including the $400 million DOE loan that was essential to get them through. But those things lined up. Elon is a force of nature and would not be denied. And they have built one of the iconic businesses and platforms in tech. And as I drive my Tesla around daily, I think back on what could have been, and just obviously economically it would have been very successful. Just the fun of being part of a transformative company like that hurts. And I work very hard in first meetings to find the what could go right question to avoid making a similar mistake again.
How do you look at a company like Boom with the supersonic jets?
I love it. And we have an entire frontier tech practice. I should give David Cowan and Tess and a number of my colleagues there a lot of credit. We've invested in rocket labs for space tech. We've done autonomous vehicle companies. I'm on board of Sila in the battery tech world. We're doing robotic fish farming. We love doing those high-tech things and absolutely are willing to take the risk where the reward is sizable enough. Boom and the hypersonic air travel, we hope works. We believe there's a market for it. The risk reward there seems very tough right now. And I would say, by the way, the same is true for the human quadcopters and drones. We believe those will have success. There are so many companies going after that right now, including Boeing and Airbus and several private endeavors, that we think that's a hard market to make a strategic bet on right now at venture scale. But we do think that ultimately will play out. We're not as sure the hypersonic aircraft will, but we absolutely are following it closely, and it wouldn't be crazy to make a bet there over time.
Yeah, so much has happened in the space and frontier tech segment over the past few years. I think we had David Cowan on maybe 4 years ago now, so we should get him back on to get the update. But
it's fascinating, and most venture firms don't have the guts to do it. Frankly, it's easier to do the low friction consumer app, or even cloud now is becoming obvious to many folks. Whereas the frontier tech stuff, it hurts when you lose money there. It looks really bad. And so you have to have conviction, and you have to have a portfolio approach, and you have to have technologists on the team who understand the mega trends. David just bet on a quantum computer company. Those types of things, the markets are there and massive, but there's a lot of ways it can go wrong. And that's part of the excitement of this industry is finding the ways for it to go really, really right.
I wonder if VR will finally have its day amidst the circumstances, we
were talking about it, VR and AR. We're probably a little more bullish on AR still, but that absolutely should unlock some use cases now, whether it's in commercial sectors and medical and real estate and construction and the like, through to entertainment. It's funny you say that. I literally just bought the new Oculus. I tried the Gen 1 and it didn't work so well, but I've got the Gen 2, and this was actually from a conversation with David where he's like, you've got to go out and try this and see it. They've made meaningful strides. So I'm going to be testing out some apps and playing with it to give it another shot. And a number of our companies, including Yelp, use AR very successfully. So I hope that it finds its way into real world entertainment and business. And I do think that may be part of the way that we break down some of these weird personal limitations of remote work to get the best of both.
Well, if you're enthusiastic about AR as well, check out my guys at Scope AR. They're in your backyard and doing some really special things, I think,
Fantastic.
In the enterprise.
I will.
That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.